Hello, namaste and good evening, everyone. Today, due to some technical problem, my video might not be visible to everyone. So I think everybody is able to hear me. Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Okay, so video is okay now. So namaste and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Wild and Life Seminar Series, which is hosted Conservation and Research Foundation. And I'm Varsha Rai from SMCRF, your moderator for today's session. And SMCRF has been hosting a Wild and Life Seminar Series since July 2021, the bi-monthly program on Sundays, with the motive of bringing national and international researchers, conservationists, and scientists to talk about their works in the field of biodiversity research and conservation and other biodiversity-related issues, including small mammals. So in this regard, today we have Mr. Sanjan Thapa, a PhD scholar at the Key Laboratory of Conservation and Application in Biodiversity of South China, School of Life Sciences, Guangzhou University, China, as a guest speaker. He's a researcher at the Small Mammals Conservation Research Foundation. He's also one of the founding members of SMCRF. Mr. Thapa has more than a decade of experience on working with small mammals in Nepal, especially bats. He's also commissioned member of IUCN Small Mammals Specialist Group, member of IUCN Otter Specialist Group, and also the member of IUCN Small Carnivores Specialist Group. So now, without much further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Sanjan Thapa for his talk. And the title of his talk will be Bats in Kathmandu Valley, a Decade of Monitoring. And before moving on to the session, I would also like to notify everyone that this session is being recorded and will be posted on the official Facebook page of SMCRF and also its YouTube channel. And please feel free to drop in your questions in the chat box, if any, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. I know many of you must be excited for today's talk as much as I am. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. So over to you, Mr. Thapa.
Thank you very much, Varsha, for this opportunity to make a presentation in this program. I hope everyone is hearing me well.
Yes, Mr. Thapa, you are audible.
Do you see my slides?
Yes, Mr. Thapa, we can see your slides.
Okay. So today's presentation is about our monitoring of the bats in the Kathmandu Valley for more than 10 years. And Kathmandu Valley, all of us may be well aware about how crowded and it's a jungle of, the city is the jungle, not the natural forest, but of the concrete. It's a concrete forest. However, we are quite lucky that we still have bats in the surrounding of Kathmandu Valley and in the outer of the Kathmandu Valley, and also we have some species within the urban area of the Kathmandu Valley. However, the number of the species and the population is quite low. So all of us might be quite interested to know why we selected Kathmandu Valley for the long-term monitoring. Because in Nepal, the Kathmandu Valley itself is a capital city and is under rapid urbanization for the infrastructure development. And this will, in fact, affect the wildlife, including the bats. So here, a paper in 2017 by Istiak et al. That mentions about the rapid growth of Kathmandu Valley with its infrastructure and they have monitored the land use, land cover chains in this city with the help of Landsat imagery, and it shows that from 1989 to 2016, we can see how fast it has made a growth. Overarching growth has been visible in Kathmandu Valley. I mean, especially in the Kathmandu, and also in other cities, nearby cities and towns of the Kathmandu valleys, such as the Patan and the Bhaktapur, also in the Kirtipur area. Next reason why we are interested to look into the bats for a long-term survey in the Kathmandu Valley, because it has a very fascinating history since 1830s. So bats has been collected and bat surveys have been started since 1830s, and the very first one to start the survey of bats and the collection of these species was, of course, Brian Hudson, as a British resident in the Kathmandu Valley. He was the only man who was quite interested to study the mammal and fauna, and also biodiversity and the culture and several aspects. So we can see a map of Kathmandu, which was published in 1802, and it shows that how small it was. I mean, the town or the city was so small at that time, and most of the parts was the agricultural landscape. And also, just 100 years ago, there is a photograph of the Kathmandu Valley taken from the Ashoka Stupa in the Patan, near the Lagankhel city, and it shows how wide, how the landscape was not so congested for the construction and the development, the infrastructure development. It was not so congested as which is we can see now. So Hudson's, so the all credit goes to the Hudsons, who started the study of mammals, including that of the bats, since 1830s. In his publication on the Mammalia of Nepal in 1832, he published, he just included the name of the genera, not the species, because he was not able to identify these species, because he was just a very enthusiastic naturalist rather than a taxonomist or a museum curator. So he just mentioned 4 genera of the bats: Vespertilio, Noctilio, Pteropus, and Rhinolophus. And after 3 years, he detailed on the vespertility of Nepalese specimens. He collected several specimens of 7 species, and he just explained about those specimens. And at that time, he could include 7 species of bats in 1835. That is nearly about 200 years ago. Then in 1841, he included 1 more species, Vespertilio muricola, which was after some time identified as Myotis muricola by Dr. Dobson. And then the species number included 8, which was increased until 1844. At the end of the 1841, he then further corrected the classified catalog of the mammals of Nepal and included 4 more species, Rhinolophus subardius as a Macrotis perniser, and the Vespertilio pallidiventris. This is the photograph of Vespertilio pallidiventris, and which is now known as Myotis nepalensis. So in 1871, after Hudson, a collector from the Indian Museum, Calcutta, visited the Kathmandu Valley, and he collected a specimen that was an adult female, and he transferred that specimen preserved in spirit to the museum, and Dr. Dobson looked into that specimen and identified the species as Vespertilio nepalensis then, and which is now called the Myrtis nepalensis. So after that, after 5 years, more specimens of Rhinolophus cornutus blighti, labeled as Rhinolophus cornutus blighti then, which is now identified as Rhinolophus pusillus, from Sundarijal, and that was written at Zoological Survey of India in Calcutta, but I don't know where is the specimen now. However, in 1876, that was the first record of a species from protected area. Now the area Sundarijal is now included in Sivapuri Nagarjuna National Park, and so this was the first record of bats from Nepalese protected area. After Hudson, one of the most important bat survey was conducted by J.B. Scully, and he was just a surgeon in the army at the British resident, and he was also an enthusiast naturalist, and he collected about 40 specimens of bats. About 40 specimens of bats from Kathmandu Valley, and he sitting at the British Museum with the help of the curators and other experts, he could identify 10 species of bats new to Nepal. He published a paper in 1887 in which he mentions about the 10 new species of bats. After Scully, a most important survey was conducted by the Bombay Natural History Society in 1911. They started the Mammal Survey in different parts of South Asia, including India, Burma, in today it's called Myanmar, and Ceylon, Sri Lanka. And in 1920, they moved into Nepal. And in three principal time periods, in 1920s, 21, and in 22, 23, they collected several specimens of bats and other mammals. So specimens of 8 species from the first 2 collections, that means in 1920, 100 years ago from now, and in 1921. So they collected the specimens of 80 species and reported 4 species from 4 localities in the Kathmandu Valley. Then it was called the Nepal Valley. And specimens of 8 species, another 8 species, that was secured from the 3rd collection, that means in May 1922 and 1923, they collected the specimens of 8 species, and they reported 6 species from 4 localities in the valley. So this was one of the major collection of the specimens, bat specimens from valley and the districts west to the Kathmandu. So P. Bailey in 1935 collected a specimen of Pipistrellus babu from Nagarkot area. It's a kind of hill station nearby Kathmandu Valley. I mean, nearby the Kathmandu in the Bhaktapur district. Another, Dr. R.L. Fleming in September 1960, he collected another specimen of Rhinolophus pearsoni from Sundarijal area. Andre Brosset collected a specimen from Sundarijal again during March 30, 1961. That has been written in the Natural History Museum, London. R.M. Mitchell, for a long time, he stayed in Nepal and he did his PhD in the Nepalese mammals. And in November 1965, his teammate L.W. Quitt and himself collected 2 specimens of the Pteropus medius. Now, it's a Pteropus giganteus is known, called as a Pteropus medius, and that specimen was lost at Bernice Powhai Museum in US. And again, another museum researcher, C.O. Major, he collected 40 specimens of Pteropus medius from Kathmandu Valley in 1966. I mean, that signifies how large the colony of the Pteropus was existing at that time in the Kathmandu Valley. So he collected 40 specimens within a year. That was especially for a Nepalese ectoparasite program. Hisashi Abe, a Japanese professor, collected specimens of Cyanopteris sphinx from Chhatrapati area, which is in urban area, and also that was the urban area then in 1968. He also collected Rhinolophus affinis, Pearsoni, Sinicus from Godavari area, which is mentioned the collection of the species in his 1971 article. And he also collected 2 specimens of Murina aurata in 1975 from Sivapuri, the top of the western hills of the Kathmandu Valley. But he could not identify the specimen. Later, Maida identified the specimens as Murina aurata and published article in 1980. Again, R.M. Mitchell and his colleague M. Natchatram, they collected the Pipistrellus babu. Now it's also called Pipistrellus javanicus babu, the subspecies from Gokarna Game Reserve in January of the year 1966. In August and September 1969, 4 specimens of 4 species, Rhinolophus ruxi, Hippocytrus armiger, Rhinolophus affinis, and Myotis sorbi was collected at Sundarijal. It should be the Manichud area of the Sundarijal. And they also collected specimens of Rugetus lustronality from Chobar area in the December of 1969. Jochen Martin, a German researcher, in May 1973, collected several specimens of Rhinolophus affinis from Nagarjun and Minapteris fuliginesus from the urban area near the Kingsway, and Rhinolophus pearsoni from unknown locality in the Kathmandu. And these specimens were mentioned in the paper in 1996 by D. Koch. Speleological expeditions has contributed the report of bat species from different parts of Nepal, including that from the Kathmandu Valley and also from the Pokhara, as well as from Pokhara. J.M. Wilson, a team member, collected several specimens of Hippocytrus cinereus and Lyroderma lyra from the caves at Chobar area. And one of his colleagues, Dr. Paul Ardo, collected specimens of Rhinolophus bacillus from Nagarjun cave. And this is mentioned in the paper Durant et al. 1979. Godavari area has been a very diverse in the field of biodiversity, including that of the bats, and Harrison Zoological Museum. They surveyed the Godavari area and collected 27 specimens of 7 species from Godavari, a few from Farping, and 2 species from Kakani area in the Kathmandu Valley. That has been mentioned in the press 2011, and the Bates and Harris in 1997 itself. So after that, the Hungarian and the Russian researchers and the expedition visited for several years in Nepal, from 1994 to 1996, even also in 1999. And during their visits, they also visited Nagarjun, Hatisar, and Chobar area and collected several specimens of 6 species of bats, especially from the Chobar area and Nagarjun area. But they only recorded Minipterus fuliginosus from the Hatisar area, which is an urban area. So, but before that, in March 1990, P. Myers and his colleagues reported 11 specimens of Minipterus fuliginosus from Kathmandu. It may be the Gairidhara area in which is near the palace. After the foreign researchers and the foreign expeditions, Nepalese started their study in terms of their dissertation work. For example, Rosen Malla from Central Department of Zoology, Tribhuvan University, he conducted his thesis on the diet analysis of the Hippocytus armiger and Alphospecialis species from the Nagarjun cave. Unfortunately, he conducted that survey based on the gut materials. So he had to kill the bats, several specimens of bats. However, he started the bat study after the foreign expeditions since 1998, and especially only for his dissertation work. After that, he hasn't never been seen back in this field. However, the Pteropus colony had been occurring in the Kathmandu Valley since a long time, and it was observed near the palace since 1960s. And then Srastra, Mazpuria, and then Acharya, and then my colleagues, Sandhya, and the Kozu, and Rajesh Rachal, they had been monitoring the Ptero camps. We were also involved in those directly and indirectly. But today I'm not talking about the Pteropus in details. Rather, we are just focused with the some other species besides the Pteropus, flying fox. So, in conclusion, since Hudson 1835, the species number elevated and ranged up to 50, sometimes 51, sometimes 53, and then again coming back to 50, and so it's just at the range of the 50. However, the species number has been increased, and we could not record several new species that has been already captured because of the several limitations, and there are some challenges in the context of our national policies. However, a few species new to Nepal has been recorded since 2000. And myself recorded the Scotophilus strawberry. My colleague recorded the Scotophilus hooli, and another colleagues, they had Tyrannicteris fulvida and some other species they have recorded. So a few species has been added to the list of the bats of the Chiroptera in Nepal. However, there are several species that has still to be added, and we have already come to the conclusion that there are several species, but due to some limitations, we haven't updated it. So if we see before 1850s, the number of species was just 11, and this within 2 centuries. I mean, it has elevated. I mean, the new records has been elevated from 11 to around 14 and 15, and then again came back with 1 or 2 in some different time periods. And in 2010 to 2020, 4 species has been added. And these are from the Nepalese researchers. So that's a good sign. So bats, besides our monitoring more than a decade, there are several species bat studies which were conducted in that time period. So Naran Kozu, he conducted his master's dissertation work in the flying fox in Salagai area. And again, my colleague Sandhya, she also conducted a very extensive and detailed research on that field. And recently, today, we can see we could see another repetitive research in that area, because it's not a innovative one, but just a continuation of the previous service. So this is the one. SMCRF also initiated a preliminary study on the ectoparasites of bats in Kathmandu Valley, but after that we haven't continued in this aspect of the bat research. We have recorded a few bat flies and bat mites from the bats in different localities in the Kathmandu Valley. Also, one of my colleagues, Santoshi Pokharel from Central Department of Zoology, conducted her master's dissertation on the diet of the bats from her hometown Pokhara, and also a cave in Kathmandu, that is the Nagarjuna cave, and she could report 25 families of the insects from the droppings of the bats from Nagarjuna as well as Mahindra cave in Pokhara. So we can see the insect parts in the bat droppings in Nagarjuna and the Mahindra cave. There is also a study on the flying fox diet based on the dropping analysis by a student, a colleague from Central Department of Environment Science in Tribhuvan University. And she recently conducted her master's dissertation work on this topic, and she has also published the paper later. We started monitoring of bats in Kathmandu Valley since 2008, and this is the photograph I was looking into. It was from 2009, and I was so lean and thin at that time. And my colleagues, this is the team. It's moving in the Bajrabarai forest. So during our monitoring, the status of bats has increased at different time periods. And overall, the bats of the Kathmandu Valley can be divided into 6 families, and that includes 15 genera and 32 species. In overall, the species count has reached 35, but we have still to publish the species. Conservation status of the bats from Kathmandu Valley includes 60% rare. I mean, 60% of the bats recorded from Kathmandu Valley is rare for the, for the local area. In context of the national red list, one species that is Myotis sorbi has been included as the critically endangered species at its endemic species to Nepal. But now we have found that the species is distributed in a wider region in different parts of Nepal, including that of the Kathmandu Valley. And in Kathmandu Valley, now it has been recorded from 5 localities. So, so the national status and of the species, including that of the Myotis sorbi, has to be updated. So if we see the conservation status, the global and the national, most of the species are least concern, and only a few species, only one species, that is Myotis sicarius, is vulnerable, and a species is not assessed, and a few species, 4 species, is data deficient, including that of the Myristolas joffrey, which has been recently recorded from the Godavari area. So the study area looks from the, from the Google Earth. This is a Google Earth image, and it looks like a ball, where like the valley looks like a ball, and it's surrounded by the forested hills. And the valley can be consists of 3 districts: Bhaktapur, Kathmandu, and Lalitpur, 3 districts, and it's situated in the central part of Nepal. And our study area includes 3 districts, 29 localities, 45 sites. Amongst those sites, 15 regular monitoring localities has been studied since 2009. And we selected these sites based on the criteria of different habitat types present in those localities, and presence of water sources, such as the streams, ponds, or the water reservoir. We also selected the study sites in forest, near the farmland area, also in the woodland, and especially also we did the route survey in caves and settlements. So there are about 29 localities, more than 29 localities, because some of the localities are not confirmed yet and hasn't been confirmed yet. And amongst those more than 29 localities, there are 15 localities which we monitor in different time periods and continuously. Not exactly the yearly monitoring, but in different time periods, we have been monitoring these study sites, these localities. If we see the sites, the most important are some of the sites are most important, and one of them is Godavari area, because there is a cave, and there is a very luxuriant forest, and there is a botanical garden which serves as a very good habitat for the bats, and there is a stream, Godavari stream, and also the temples also serves as the temporary roost and foraging roost. During the foraging times, the temporary roost for Rhanopus sinicus and Barbastella darjeelingensis. Besides Godavari, there are some other promising areas, such as best areas such as the Chobar region. The Chobar area is so good for the bats. Some bat species, including the permanent roost of the Hippocytrus cinereus, which is very rare in the South Asia, and the Nagarjun, which is a very good habitat for several species of rhinolophid bats. But previously, from those areas, there were several collection, several records of the different species of bats besides rhinophytes, including the Minipterus fuligineus, Megaderma lyra, Hippocytrus armiger. However, during our more than a decade-long monitoring, we couldn't capture any of those species. Rather, we could capture the several species of rhinophyte bats from Rhinopus affinis, Rhinopus vermiquinum, Rhinopus bacillus, Rhinopus lepidus, Rhinopus macrotis, and in different seasons and in different months. It's quite interesting, the seasonal difference of the species composition and species occurrence in different sites of Kathmandu Valley is of quite interesting phenomena, which has to be studied further and in details. So Nagarkot area, and then there is a hydropower station, which is called as the first in the Asia. In 1900s, it was established, and this has a tunnel, and this tunnel also supports the roosting colonies of several species of bats, including Minipterus fuligineus, Rhinopus affinis, even Mammal Survey. The headquarters of the Sivapuri Nagarjuna National Park, the place is called Mohanpokhari, and also known as the Pani Mohan, because there is a water reservoir supplied for the Kathmandu Valley. The Kathmanduites, and this area also serves as a very good foraging site, and there might be some roosting colonies of those species and several species in the Pani Mohan. And we are also conducting, we are also going to celebrate International Bat Night in this area. However, it's raining from a long time in Nepal, since few days. And I don't know what will happen during our program, but we're going to celebrate in this site, and it's a very important site for the bat assemblage in Kathmandu, in Kathmandu Valley. The most important, along with the Godavari, is the Vajravarahi area, which is a religious forest, and there is a stream and a very luxuriant forest in Vajravarahi, which serves a very good habitat of several species of bats, and especially for the Myotis sicarius, the vulnerable species of the bats in Nepal, and the Himalayan endemic bat. It's a Himalayan endemic, and it has only been reported from a long time from this area. And we couldn't capture the Myotis sicarius. We couldn't record Myotis sicarius from any other sites in Kathmandu, any other 29 sites in Kathmandu Valley. However, it serves to some sites serves to be the temporary roost for the colonies and the foraging sites for the bats. However, a few sites such as the Matsegaon and the Jhor area, we couldn't record any bat species until now. And also the settlement that includes the old buildings that serves as the permanent roost for several species of bats, including the Pipistrellus javanicus and also the Rhinopus affinis. A very large colony, about 300 individuals of Rhinopus affinis was found in the Saku area in the old building. However, during the 2015 earthquake, this building was collapsed, and we don't know about the colony that existed there. Another good area for the best habitat and good area for the bats is the Sundarijal, because it has a water reservoir and the stream, and there is a tunnel. So this area is also very good area for Kathmandu Valley bat assemblage. So during our monitoring, we especially work with the bat call recordings, and we collected the call of the bats, the echolocation calls during the release and during the handheld, and also in the flight when some bats passes by the detectors, and it records the calls. And We also take environmental data from hygrometer and lux meter, and we take the GPS locations using the TREX GPS device, and we collect the data and analyze in just simply we just analyze it in the Excel worksheet. Also, we analyze using some softwares, and we do some GIS work, a lot of GIS works, and we do the distribution mapping using those equipments. And especially for the monitoring, we do phase 1 habitat survey, and in different time frame, and especially in different classified habitats, such as the caves, forest, streams, ponds, settlements, even the woodlands. So we use the gloved hands to capture the bats, and we take the measurements deploying the digital calipers and the pressure spring balance, and we take the photographs of the bat species using the different cameras. Here just one is mentioned. Okay, so and we sometimes used to do a bat survey at least at a gap of 6 months and even more to avoid the harassment from the misnetting and the repeated surveys. But nowadays we are doing the bat surveys frequently, sometimes within a month or even sometimes within 2 or 3 months, because we found that the bat species assemblage is changing. I mean, it's diverse seasonally. So for the seasonal record of the bats, we are doing now the bat surveys in months, and also in 2 or 3 or more than less than 6 months. So during our surveys, we captured the bat species from more than 29 localities, 45 sites. These are the sites where we captured the bats in 3 districts in the Kathmandu Valley, and most of them are from the forested regions. Although the urban area of Kathmandu shows the bat records, but the number of species, the species richness is very low, just 1, and especially the species are Miniprus fuliginosus, and most of the species from the forested region, and a few from the woodland, and also from the farmland areas. And until now, we have captured several species, around 35, and we have also some new records. However, it has yet to be published, and because of the lack of the genetic material and the genetic facilities, we couldn't update the list until now, and we haven't published yet. Such as the Nyctalus aviator, the bird-like noctule, and the Mytis fretter, and Synaptus brachiotis. And we also have a few, and also confirmed record of the Murina leucocaster. And we have some new records to Nepal, and first records to Kathmandu Valley of Barbastella darjeelingensis, Eptesticus serotinus, Mirastrellus joffrey, and several Rallopus lepidus, and several other species. And it's very interesting to look into the seasonal variation of the bat assemblage in Kathmandu Valley. When we looked into those areas, we can see the seasonal species richness at different locality changes, and also the in different months, and so these are from the different months, and in different time periods, but it's in different time periods, not within a same year. And mostly the species richness is seen higher in the November or in the autumn in Nepal. Similarly, the same with the species, we can see the change in the species richness at different months. So most of the species are from, most of the species has been recorded in November, and in August and July, and then also in February. And for the most of the species, such as the Miniprus fuliginosus, we can see in November and Pipistrellus javanicus in November. These species are has a high abundance, and other species has a low abundance in different months. And in July and August also there are some several species. I mean, the species richness is high, however, the abundance is low. So also for the bat species differs seasonally in terms of localities at different localities. The species richness changes with the season, and also the number of the individuals that were captured during those surveys at that time periods and at that time season. I mean, at that seasons or the months also differ in different localities for the different species. For example, Miniaturus fuligineus is around more than 80 specimens. 80 individuals of Miniaturus fuligineus have been captured so far within more than, I think, 20 years. So also in case of the localities, Pipistrellus javanicus has been recorded in about 11 localities in Kathmandu Valley, and the Hippocytrus armiger, and similarly the Myotis sicarius only from 3. However, it hasn't been recorded from other 2 localities besides the Bazarbarahi area and the Rhanolophus luctus, and Cyanoprus sphinx can be captured from had been captured from several areas in Kathmandu Valley. And more individuals of Miniaturus fuligineus, Hippocytrus armiger, even Myotis cervi, Pipistrellus javanicus, and Rhanolophus affinis, and Rhanolophus pusillus has been captured, including the Rhanolophus sinicus also. And in case of the study sites, species richness is more for the Godavari area, around 17 species, and the individuals captured is more in Nagarjun, but the species richness is low at that area. However, the species richness is high in Bazarbarahi, but the specimens captured, the individuals captured is low as compared to other areas, not compared to the species, but as compared to the other localities. So when we see different, we have more than 29 localities. So which localities serves to be the best biodiverse area in terms of bats? We can just see that the Godavari area with the Sun and Manner Index 2.23, and then Bazarbarahi, and the Nagarjun, Chobar, Ichangunaren, and so on. Similarly, the areas such as the classified habitats such as the forest, that serves to be the best habitat with the Sun and Manner Index of 2.42, and then caves, after that tunnel also serves as a good habitat for the bats. And most of the localities are the forest, caves, and also the settlements. But we have very less number of species from the settlements and more from the mountains. So we have total 35 species of bats recorded from Kathmandu Valley until now, within 200 years, within 200 years. And we have initiated the Nepal Bat Call Library, the SMCRF. It's in the SMCRF website and also in the stored offline. So we have more than 25 calls, recorded bat calls during this release, and a handheld, especially. So these are some of the reference acoustic calls in our store of the Nepal Bat Call Library, including that in the website also. Some of them are also in the website. So these are the peak frequency and the mean frequency difference in some of the species of the bat calls recorded until now. And it's very helpful to distinguish some of the closely related species, such as the Rhinolophus affinis and the Sinicus. We can see a very marginal difference, very small, minute difference in its call characteristics. However, there are some specific characteristics that can differentiate the species, including that from the morphological characteristics. And we have also mapped the species richness of the bats in the Kathmandu Valley, and we can see that most of the bat species, high diversity of the bat and the species richness of the bats are from the forest area. However, some suburban areas also serves better as the bat diversity hotspots and near to the urban areas of the Kathmandu, because these are the caves and others are nearby the forest areas. And within the urban area of Kathmandu Valley, the species richness is quite low, just about 1 or 2 species. So this clearly signifies that these settlements or the built-up areas, that means the rapid urbanization and the uncontrolled, unmanaged, haphazard urbanization will impact bats, not only the bats, but also all kind of biodiversity. So we can see the species richness according to the land use or land cover, and also for the streams, because most of the mist netting sites are nearby the streams or over the streams. So this species richness in the Kathmandu Valley. And if we see in the Google Earth map the species richness, we can also see that this area is Bajrabarai. This serves as a very good areas with a high diversity, because this is a cave, and here is also cave Chobar cave and the Nagarjun cave, and this is also the Bozini area. So these areas serves as a very good habitat hotspot for the bat assemblies in Kathmandu Valley. So bat species in Kathmandu Valley, they normally ranges from the bat, the habitats and the bat capture sites ranges from about 1400 to 1500 meters. However, some of the species has been captured from 2500 meters also, such as the Murina aurata and the Rhinolophus sinicus, and some species like the Pipistrellus javanicus and the Hypsugo affinis captured more than 2000 meter, and most of these species are captured within the range of the 1500 and 1600 meters. The same thing is here with the lower elevation for some species in some the sites, in different sites. The different sites are, most of the sites are within the range of the 1400 to 1600 meters, and a few sites more than 2000, and within 2000 there are very few sites, mostly more than 1200 to around 1600 meter, 1700 meter. So one would be very interested to see the species distribution in Kathmandu Valley, and I will just skip very fast because the time is not enough for with us. So if we are interested, we can see the distribution of some species here, and we have very few localities of the bat species in Kathmandu Valley, very few for some species like the Sanitary Sphinx, Eptesica serotina is just one. So I'll just go it as a showcase, and so like the Mirastrella Joffrey, only one from Godavari, and also Myotis nipalensis. This is the Myotis nipalensis, and it's from the only one site. Myotis Icarius from 3 sites, however, it hasn't been reported from other sites rather than the Bajrabarai, other than the Bajrabarai. And this is the aviator from 2 sites, noctule from 1 site, and then pipistrelles from several sites, especially the Pipistrellus javanicus from several sites, and only 2 sites for the terror camps. This is for the roosting colonies, not for the presence absence. And Rhinolophus affinis is one of the species which is highly distributed in Kathmandu Valley, including the Hippocytrus armiger and other species. and Minotaurus fuligineus, Ralphus ruxi from just a single site, and Locust from a few sites, and Sinicus from also from a few sites. Okay, there are some good opportunity for us to study bats in Kathmandu Valley still, because we have several sites to survey yet, and we could get the photographs of several species, and we lack the specimens, and that's why we can't identify these species, and also we don't have a very good lab facility for genetics, and we lack all this the funding, and the equipment are also quite expensive for us, and the genetic facility would be the most important for the future of the bat research in Nepal. So thank you very much for my team for supporting this work and continuing our monitoring work, and all these respected personalities and my colleagues and my teachers and all the contributors. I would like to acknowledgement and thank you very much. And I would love to see some of you in the International Bat Night in Pani Mohan area in Sivapuri, Nagasam. Okay, thank you very much. Varsha, you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Sanjan Thapa. Your presentation was so much inspiring. Your more than a decade-long journey working on bats, working on this very neglected species in Nepal, because in Nepal, most of the researchers are mostly focused on flagship species, the more charismatic species, and you are encouraging everyone, you are encouraging many people to work on this very neglected species. So thank you very much for that. So I would like to request everyone, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box and we'll take them from there. And Mr. Thapa will be answering for you. So before we have questions coming in. So before that, I have one question for Mr. Sanjan Thapa. So before going to the technical part, I just wanted to ask you that what inspired you to work with bats? I'm sure many people here are young graduates who are willing to hear from you, because bats are elusive, they are nocturnal, and they are very hard to it's very hard to catch its glance. So what inspired you to work with bats and go at night searching for bats? What inspired you?
Well, thank you very much, Varsha, for your very nice query. Actually, I never think to study the bats before. When I joined my master's, I was lucky to get a training course conducted by organized by Zoo Outreach Organization from India, and Professor Paul A. Racy, the Asian Bat Specialist Group co-chair, was there to teach us, and from there I started my journey, and I continued this bat surveys and bat conservation in Nepal. There was no any reason for me to attract towards the bat, but just I was involved with the training, and then I decided to continue my learnings from that training course, and to continue, and my desire to learn more and to get more and more knowledge just helped me to continue in this field.
Thank you. So we have one question from Mr. Luang Nguyen. He's from Vietnam, and he asks, how many ectoparasite of bat species do you have in Nepal?
We have just done some preliminary surveys, and we have found very few species of, actually we couldn't identify up to the species level, neither to species nor to the general level, just until to the order or the families, and we just have 3 or 4 families of bat ectoparasites, And this was just a preliminary survey. We haven't continued its detailed surveys in Nepal. So some of us who are listening here might be interested to work in that. But I know that the funding is very crucial in this research, and we always lack funding. So I don't know how long it will take to continue this approach.
All right. So another question we have from Mr. Taraka Kusuminda, who is from Sri Lanka, and he asks, what is the habitat preference of Barbastella and possible trapping sites according to your experience?
In case of Kathmandu, the habitat for the Barbastella is a forest, and it's a second. But I can't say whether it's a primary or a secondary forest, but it's a forest. And also it's its permanent habitat must be a forest, and it's a temporary habitat, especially for the foraging and during the winter. It was also found in a temple, inside of a temple, roosting inside a temple.
Sanjan, are they roast in caves?
No, we haven't found the species from cave. Just one individual was captured from the temple, inside the temple. I saw in one of my slides there was a temple in Godavari, so we captured that species from that temple. But the temple lies in a very dense forest, and especially it's a secondary forest. So I hope the habitat for the Barbastella in Kathmandu Valley is the secondary forest rather than the caves. So we haven't found inside a cave. And also it's a solitary species, and it's very difficult to say that at this very preliminary situation that whether the Barbastella roost in a cave in our sites or not. So maybe further surveys can decide, or confirm that.
So again, if you have any questions, it can be anything relating to bats. If you have any questions, please add them in the chat box. So meanwhile, in one of your slides, you were talking about seasonal species richness at different localities in Kathmandu. So we could see that there were very few species of bats captured in many localities in different seasons. So what might be the cause of that? Is it that the habitat is not suitable for bats? That is why you could catch only one species of bat during one season, and in other seasons you were not able to catch any bat. Is it because the habitat is not suitable for bats?
No, some of the habitats are very good and good habitats, but a few habitat might be acting as a temporary roost for them and temporary foraging sites. But most of the habitats, such as Godavari, Bajravarahi, and Chobar, Nagarjun, Sundarijal, and a few sites that's a very good site for the bats assemblage in Kathmandu Valley. And the difference is because of their might be some sort of short migration in those bats. We are not sure whether that occurs in Nepal or not. So because for that we have to do further advanced research, and we lack them. But it's quite interesting to see the seasonal difference in the occurrence of the bat species at different sites.
So what are the other factors that might also affect bat capture success rate during the field surveys?
Might be because we have been doing surveys at a site just for a single day. In some areas we have conducted for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days, and we could find more species. So in most of the sites we have just conducted the bat surveys in just a single day. So maybe that may be a reason.
Okay. So one more thing. But during your presentation, we got to know that Vajraparahi forest, Vajraparahi forest is highly diverse in terms of bat species, and it is just a fragment of a forest patch. It's a forest patch in the Kathmandu Valley. So, what do you think if we work on increasing the number of forest patches in the urban area? Will the bat species richness enhance in urban areas, or what will be done?
Because in the urban areas, the different classified habitats are very less. And in the rural areas or in the suburban areas of Kathmandu Valley, there are several habitats, classified habitats, because there are caves, there are forests, there are streams. So the number of bat species increase in those sites rather than in the urban areas. And because the urban areas are a concrete jungle and only settlements are there, and there are no even the gardens. If there are some gardens, if there are streams and different classified habitats within the urban areas, still the bat diversity is fine. But in those areas with the just concrete jungle and not much habitat types, the species richness is low.
All right. So we again have a question from Mr. Basu Baral. He says, I wanted to know whether anthropogenic noises affects the occurrence of bat or not.
It may affect the occurrence, I mean the assemblage of the bats, but still the bat survives and thrives in those areas. For example, even the large species of bats, Pteropus colonies, Pteropus medius colonies are still occurring in the highly disturbed and noise polluted areas, and also other air polluted areas. And in the settlements, there are Pipistrellus coromandra, Javanicus, Minipterus fuliginosus. Yes, the species richness and their abundance or this population are quite low, but still a few species of bats occur in the urban areas, and also in those areas which are very affected by the noise and the air pollution.
So that means, is it that urban areas will always have less bat species in terms of other natural habitats?
Indeed.
Okay. So if you have any other questions, please add them in the chat box. We have just around 15 minutes for today's session. So in 15 minutes, please drop in your questions here. So another question we have from Mr. Soni Lama. She says, what is the spatiotemporal migration pattern of bats in Nepal?
We haven't looked into the migration because it needs our further advanced research, and we lack those. And but what we come to know from different the occurrence of the species at different sites in different seasons, and also the number of capture at different sites in different seasons at different months, it varies a lot. So from that we can just clue that, I mean, from that may clue that there is a certain migration of the species. And we know in case of the pterocamps in Kathmandu Valley, we know that the species migrates during the winter season, but we don't know where it goes. So, but we know that it migrates, but we don't know where it goes. So we can say at the temporal part, yes, some of the species migrates, but at the spatial part, we are not sure where it's migrating.
And another question, what are the positive impacts of city lights on bat ecology?
We haven't looked into this aspect also. However, there are several researches on the effect of the city lights on the bats assemblies in European cities, especially in the UK and France and Germany and some other European cities. And it seems that the red lights in those areas are bat friendly, rather than the CFL, what is called this? What are the lights nowadays? It's called, okay. So the white light, I mean the white beam of light it produces, it's not good for the bats in comparison to the red lights. I mean the red bulb, what is called the red color bulb.
Okay, sure. So in addition to that, what suggestions can you give to our young researchers about regarding the aspects of bats that they can do research on? What are the aspects that we can do bat research on?
Yeah, there are several areas still left. I mean, there are still a few questions coming from our listeners, our colleagues, that what are the impacts of um, the pollution, the noise impact, and also the uh, ecological part, and also the migration pattern, especially temporal migration pattern. So our young deserving people can work on this aspect in near future. However, it's very difficult for us to manage the funds, but still we can initiate this research if you are very interested to conduct this aspect of the bat research in coming years.
Thank you. So if we don't have any questions, maybe now we can move on to our last session, which is the concluding remarks. And so we have Mr. Kozu for our concluding remarks today. He is the executive member of SMCRF, and he is also faculty member at Trichandra Multiple Campus. And Mr. Nyopane is also a member of IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group, and he has experience on working with small mammals such as bats and pangolin in Nepal. So thank you so much, Mr. Sanjan, for your time today. As he has already said, we also have our International Bat Night 2021 event day after tomorrow on August 31 in Shivapuri Nagarjuna National Park. And it seems that many of the participants here who are present here today are joining us on the event day as well. So now I would like to request Mr. Kausubraj Nyopane for his concluding remarks. Over to you, Mr. Nyopane.
Thank you, Barsha, and thank you, Sanjan, and everyone who joined this webinar. Talk about Sanjan Thapa and bat. I think because Sanjan Thapa is mentor of myself. I have been a part of some of his work, and we have been working together since 2010. And talking about Sanjan Thapa, I think he's not only he's a person to introduce and to motivate most of the youth, particularly who are working on the bat in Nepal from the last decade. And as we have seen, history of recording bat species goes around 200 years back, but taking to a higher level, it has been always initiated only a decades ago. And after that, particularly talking about as being an ecological student, we know that the importance of monitoring and having a longitudinal data is a very important aspect for ecological research. And Sanjan Thapa has initiated this task of monitoring the bats of Kathmandu Valley. And as we know that SMCRF is also hosting a sound recording, identify the bat. I think that is a great asset to taking the bat, study of bat to a next level. Yes, as we know that urbanization is sprawling, and the house structure. If we see the old houses a few years back, I think they were a good place habitat for the bats. But with the changing of the housing structure, I think bat species has been shifted from the center city to the urban area, and particular to the forest. Yeah, and I think now the research on bats now need to be moved. Like the question that has been raised, like the impact of pollution, city lights, and I think the climate change can be another broader issue that recently IPCC 6th assessment has come out, which has said that there are major changes in the rainfall pattern and the rise in the temperature in the Himalayan region, and will have a differential impact, particularly in the Himalayan area. I think even maintaining 1.5 degree will be more challenging and impacting the biodiversity. I think this can be a new issue that can be explored in the future. As we come from the developing country, definitely as Sanjan has been repeatedly saying, the challenge of being situating in Nepal, studying that, and moving to the genetics and having a lack of lab and having a lack of fund, as most of the fund goes to the most charismatic and charismatic species. So that I think this scenario struggle Sanjan had in his life and bringing this and motivating all the youth, I think that's an excellent job he has done in nearly more than a decade of time. And I like to salute and hats off to Sanjan for all his work done on behalf of the bat conservation. And I think in Nepal now, bat study and Sanjan Thapa is a synonym to all of people. And I think Sanjan didn't mention here, I think most of the people that SMCRF has brought a book on field guide for bats. That's the first book of Nepal that has been published by SMCRF about the bats of Nepal. That was also one of the pioneer things that SMCRF has done. Finally, I would like to thank Sanjan Thapa for your very long and your detailed presentation about that, motivating everyone. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar. I hope that you will be joining on this SMCRF mission for the conservation of wildlife. Thank you. Over to you, Barsha.
Thank you so much, Mr. Neopane, for such a beautiful concluding remarks for today. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjan, for your contribution in bat research in Nepal, and for being an inspiration for all of us. Talking about him, he's also one of my mentors. He has taught me everything about bats till date, and so I thank him for that as well. And hopefully, after his PhD, we'll get to see a few more papers from him regarding bat research in Nepal. And thank you so much, Mr. Sanjan, for that. And everyone, thank you so much who joined us today and made this webinar. And hope you all enjoyed this webinar. And thank you so much, Mr. Sanjan. And see you, everyone, during the 5th episode of Wild and Life Seminar Series. Till then, good evening and goodbye.
Thank you very much.